Good evening, Vancouver. It is 10 p.m. on a Wednesday, and not a Wednesday in which we didn't do a show on the Monday. This is is this our first emergency podcast, or is it our second?
I feel like we've done one before for something. There's got to be something.
Maybe betting in Farlow. That happened on a Saturday, and I think we did a show on the Monday. Either way, it's a big day for the Canucks. For the first time in Canucks After Dark history, the Canucks are buying ahead of the trade deadline. Well, I mean, unless you want to go off season and think of Oliver Ekman-Larsson, but I don't want to. So, as always, but rarely on Wednesdays, joined by my co-host, Canuck Clay. How are you feeling this Wednesday evening?
So, Parker, this is funny. We were kind of joking about this, what we were doing when the news broke. It was happening so fast. It came out of nowhere, and then it was like, okay, it's probably for Kuzmenko. It might be one-on-one, but it might be picks and prospects. And then suddenly, just boom, it comes out. I'm at my church doing my Wednesday night thing, and this is where my humility had to come in today, because I wasn't worried about being the first to report it or whatever. Like, I just want to share my opinion on it. I don't care about the numbers and stuff, but I was basically telling kids and parents, leave me alone so I can run into a side room to record a quick 3-minute vlog.
Yeah, my day was interesting. So I finished up my work 4 o'clock, and at like 4:15, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go lay down. I'm tired. I had hockey last night. I'm gonna have a little nap today. Exactly. So I'm lying down, and then one of my group chats blows up. It's like, hey, we got news coming. Like they might trade for Lindholm, and so I pull it up, and it's one of those ones where every time that like someone says, hey, like this trade is sort of in the works, nothing really happening yet, every single time it's done within an hour. It feels like, right? And then everything starts coming up.
Right.
All right, I get up, roll downstairs, and have a bunch of tabs open. And my thought was, right, I'm just start prepping for a video. I'm going to learn a bunch about Lindholm. I'm going to have tabs open, because I'm thinking in 15 minutes, we've got a trade and we've got details. The trade, so that initial Friedman tweet, I think was at 4:15 or 4:30. Yeah. And then like 10, 15 minutes later, I was like, it is done. Kuzmenko is involved.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like, all right, now we're just waiting for details. And we had to wait like an hour from then of me just hitting refresh before the Flames ended up having the details first, right? That Flames tweet.
Yeah. So you and Nuck649 were the same.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I was, every single thing that happened, I had a new tab for, and it was like, I had like 11 different tabs in the timeline. Then it was like, and then like 5:15, it was like, hey, Tanev might be involved in this deal. And I'm going crazy. I'm like, if we get Lindholm and Tanev, like, what an absolute crazy move this would be, a month ahead of the trade deadline. Obviously, that didn't come to fruition. Yeah. But yeah, it was a really, really interesting afternoon that really didn't have any right to be. Like there's two teams still playing hockey for some reason today. I don't know why. Everyone's on the All-Star break except them. And Alvin gets extended today. Like it's like the perfect like downtime. It's All-Star break. Everyone's going on vacation, yada, yada, yada. And then Jim Rutherford's like, hey, wait, maybe we make a trade before All-Star. Like he says that on the radio, and everyone's like, what are you talking? Like no one does that. And then this drops, 6 hours later.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy. By the way, we love everyone here. We already have 120 people 3 minutes in. We can feel that this is going to be a big show, but among you is an icon in the content creation world. Hey, Lego, nice to see you. The trade was a huge L. Canucks should have traded for Shinkarik. Yes, get that guy back.
Yeah, they are. That's a lost asset that you need to pull
Nice
back.
To see you, Gio. Thanks for being here. Thanks to everyone for being here. Yeah, we pulled this. Basically, Parker texted me when I was at my church thing, and he says, show tonight. I said, is the trade going to happen? He goes, yep. I said, okay.
So, yeah, I think, when was that Friedman tweet? I think that was at 4:15.
Right at 4:30.
Was it right at 4:30?
Yep, right at 4:30.
Okay, I texted you at 4:35. And I said, would Lindholm be an emergency Canucks After Dark situation?
And what did I say back?
You said yes if we keep it at 10 p.m. And then you said, do you think it happens today? Yeah. And I said, I do. And
here we are.
I knew it was coming. It was great. You have like Kevin Weeks like doing Twitter videos, walking, like boarding a plane. It was a very bizarre day, but Yeah, the Vancouver Canucks have added a bona fide, very good number 2 center.
Yeah.
And that has been, for the last month, we have really been talking about on our normal Monday night shows, hey, if the Canucks are going to make a move, the Canucks are going to add somebody. 2C is probably where they want to go, right? And really, from our perspective, it was an issue of, if you're putting Pettersson, Miller, and Besser together, right, and then suddenly your next, if you're putting Pettersson or Miller on the wing at any point, Pius Suter is now your number 2 center. That's probably not ideal.
Right.
If
despite his recent
goes,
hat trick,
right, and all credit to Pius Suter, he's been fantastic. It's just not his job, right? It's not the role that he's brought in for.
Correct.
And then if someone goes down, right, suddenly now Phil DiGiuseppe's having to slot in the lineup once he's healthy, or you're starting to dip into the Linus Carlsons of the world, and there's a pretty big drop off. Where on defense they sort of have like 7-8 guys. Like you can throw Juleson in there, you can throw Friedman in there. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
So they just go out and they do it a month ahead of the trade deadline. It's not like this team is battling to stay in the playoffs and they need an influx of talent. They just said, hey, Jim Rutherford loves to set the market. And that's what he did today. He got ahead of it. He got his guy, one of the biggest names out there from a trade target perspective, right? It's like him and Gensel were the big names of the ones that were actual rentals that were likely to be traded. And then I think back to when Jim Benning ran out of time and how we were all like, oh, maybe that's just a thing that happens. GMs just run out of time. Not here.
No, not at all. It's quite legendary. And speaking of legends, we got Hot Take in here as well. So between Hot Take and Geo, we got like 120,000 subscribers in here, which is pretty cool. Thank you, John, for being here as well. So here, Parker, 5 pretty solid off-season signings, right? Free agent, no trades. Cole, Soucy, Suter, Bluger, Irwin, who we haven't seen yet. 6 in-season trades before today, including big ones: Lafferty, DeSmith, Zadorov. But this one trumps them all. So are we surprised? You're exactly right. He likes to set the market. He likes to, he likes to be out there and not worry about what other teams. He just wants to get out in front of things. And it kind of makes sense, right? Why wait till March 6th to get Lindholm? Now we have him for 5 extra weeks where he can chemistry and standings and all that kind of stuff, so maybe build his value up too. So I know we're going to get into everything: Vancouver's perspective, Calgary's perspective, too much, too little, speculation, all these things. That's what makes trade talk so fun. It really is.
Yeah, timing's always been a really interesting discussion around the trade deadline, right?
Yeah,
because you can go make a trade on the trade deadline and you might have played like 68 games already, right? You might only have 15 games around there, maybe 20, to actually like build that chemistry and have that gear up for the playoffs.
Yeah.
But that also carries less injury risk, right? There's less opportunity for someone to get hurt in that time as well. So it's a little bit of a balancing act. And what I look at, and I even said, I said 2 minutes ago, well, the Canucks, it's not like the Canucks are like pushing for a playoff spot and they need that influx of talent.
Yep.
But the Canucks are pushing for first place in the Western Conference. And that's, I think, something that's been a little bit understated overall, like how important first place in the Western Conference is this year when you're looking at the difference between playing against like the St. Louis Blues, the Nashville Predators, or the Seattle Kraken compared to playing against the LA Kings if you come second in the Western Conference. Or if you come second in the Pacific, now you're playing Vegas or Edmonton in the first round, right? The Canucks should be doing everything they can to finish ahead of Colorado, finish ahead of Edmonton, finish ahead of Dallas and Winnipeg, right? There's a bunch of teams pushing for the top that I think that also adds value. And obviously it's not the big thing, right? The big thing is gearing up your roster for a Stanley Cup push. But, the earlier you do something like this, maybe that helps as well.
Yeah. So before we break down every piece here, just this is going to be a little bit challenging. So without getting into specifics about every single player, especially Lindholm, what was your first reaction, Parker? Your true first reaction? Too much, too little?
With all the details or just Lindholm?
No, so with all the details that but I don't want us to go into the details yet. Just a cursory. What was your thought?
Yeah, well, I was very dialed in and focused from a research perspective, and then I see so many line items on the screen that are coming from the Canucks, and I'm like, oh boy, I need to actually like sit and think, right? I'm like, because I'm thinking like Kuzmenko first prospect. I got Kuzmenko. I know what a first is worth. I'm gonna have to like think about Atu Ratu or whoever they get rid of in this trade, right? So I see all those lineups, and my initial thought is like, whoa, this is, it's big, right? You look at Zadorov, that trade, we expected, a pretty heavy price, and it really didn't end up being one. And every trade, but I will say, like, that hour and 15 minutes leading up to actually getting the details were not that stressful because we haven't been completely fleeced in a deal yet, right? Everything's been fairly reasonable. So I wasn't too worried about that. I had a little bit of sticker shock. I was like, oh, that's a lot of items. But we'll get obviously into the specifics a little bit more too.
Yeah, same with me. When I saw the 5 assets, in my head, and this, I think one thing we got to be very careful, Parker. I think Canucks fans, it's going to be easy for a lot of Canucks fans to justify the trade. It's going to be very easy for a lot of Calgary Flames fans to justify the trade because that's what we do. Because we want to think that our team got the best of the trade. We got the best player in the trade, so that's often a big thing. But when you just look at the 5 assets, I would say 4 of them there's potentially that don't work out, honestly. And Kuzmenko could be 4.5. So I do like this. Rento or not Rento, obviously it looks a lot better if we can re-sign Lindholm. But for a team, for where the Canucks are at, I was actually remarkably at peace with the trade. I was fine with it. I think I was excited because we were the team getting the best player, honestly.
Yeah, from a holistic perspective, my overall thoughts on the trade, strictly value wise, I think Calgary comes out ahead. If I was Calgary and I had a rental like Elias Lindholm, and I got those assets back, think about the Bo Horvat trade last year, right?
Yeah,
similar sort of vibe, right? I would have been thinking, wow, we did pretty good here. We had an expiring asset that we weren't going to get anything for. We're a month ahead of the trade deadline. Their GM even said like, hey, these are the things that I wanted. These are the things that we got, right?
Yeah.
So from Calgary's perspective, I think they did a great job on this trade.
Mm-hmm.
From a Canucks perspective, these are assets that right now aren't relevant, frankly, right? Kuzmenko isn't fitting in with Tocchet's system. However, Tocchet has coached this team to a 33-11-5 record. So if one player isn't working out under him, but you have a bunch of other ones who are, sure, you can cut that one player, right? A first round pick, hey, hopefully it's number 32, but maybe it's in the 26 to 32 range.
Yeah.
Chance at a good player, potentially, right?
Potentially.
Hunter Brzustewicz, obviously he's sort of maybe at the peak of his value, right? He was like 3rd in OHL scoring and he's a D-man. Like, that's fantastic. And there is a chance, like you mentioned, that he doesn't pan out. There's also a chance that he turns into a really solid, number 4 defenseman. And for Calgary, that'll be great for them, 3-4 years from now. But for the Canucks, you look at their right side and you're going to have Filip Hronek, you're going to have Tom Wielander up there, hopefully, if everything pans out well. And, maybe you've sold this guy at the peak of his value when he has the most hype around him. And maybe he becomes a good player, and we can't say he won't, but maybe he doesn't. And that's just the business of, trading prospects.
Yeah.
There's a real chance every single thing that we've traded them turns into nothing. And then, 5 years from now, the Canucks look great with a re-signed Lindholm and are competing for Stanley Cup still. There's also a real chance that every single one of those things pans out. There's no way for us to know, but Calgary probably got the most value. But as a Vancouver fan, these aren't things that were going to be impactful right now. And I'm just excited. We haven't had this reason to believe that our team actually could be a cup contender potentially, right? The Canucks went and got a player that is having a bad year, but excels around good players. And the Canucks can put him next to good players. They can put him next to Elias Pettersson if they want to, or JT Miller and Brock Besser if they want to. Like, they can do some things here that I think Lindholm's going to look really good. I think Kuzmenko is going to turn it around in Calgary and be annoying to deal with whenever we play them. And I think that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned, and I guess we should start by talking about Lindholm first. We'll break each of these pieces down a little bit. Not too much, but enough. Lindholm, you're right. 2 years ago, 82 points in 82 games. The year that he played with Tkachuk and Gaudreau, and that's not just 82 points a point a game. That's all 82 games. So this guy's durable. 81, 81, 82. I'm looking at games played 82, 80. So I like that. And I like that a lot. And last year, yeah, he didn't have those two guys to play with, and he still got 64 points. And that's
right. He had Toffoli last year.
Yeah, exactly. And this year he's on pace. I read 53 or something like that, maybe.
And he's got nobody. like really, like he really doesn't have. I don't know exactly whose lineups were, but they weren't notable from everything I read.
Sure.
Not that I've been following the Flames very closely, but you know, he's very clearly been a very good supporting cast member, right?
Yeah,
I think if you stick him with Pettersson or with Mikheyev and Höglander or something, you try to get some skill next to him and some guys that can do some play creation. He really feels like a really good fit.
He was plus 61 2 seasons ago. Plus 61. Anyway, that's pretty good.
Absurd number.
So
I didn't know it goes that high.
Yeah, it just popped out. So the other thing about Lindholm, and we both read The Athletic and we read other industry stuff. When you look at the Canucks needs, if you had to pick one player that actually ticked off more than one box, not just a shooter, not just a penalty killer, this is a guy who checks off 4 or 5 boxes: right shot centerman, power play experience, penalty kill experience. I probably missed a couple other ones in there, but at least he's not a one-dimensional player, and I think that's a big part of this for sure.
Yeah, from a power play perspective, they lose Kuzmenko and add Lindholm, right? That's a straight up upgrade on the power play.
Yeah.
Penalty killing wise, he hasn't been great this year, but he has been in the past. I would think he might be a decent addition.
Face-offs,
power play.
Yeah, right.
A big thing though, like you mentioned, right shot center.
Yeah.
Canucks don't have anyone right-handed that can reliably win faceoffs. I think Elias Lindholm's at 55.5% this year in the faceoff circle. Right,
that's good.
That's nice on a penalty kill. You have a faceoff on the right of your goaltender. Yeah. He's going to be out there, right? High leverage faceoff in the offensive zone on the left-hand side that you need a quick shot from the right point, maybe end of a period or something. Elias Lindholm's going to be out there, right? Mm-hmm. That's definitely there's definitely some extra value in that.
Yeah, thank you. So that's what it is. Right shot center, good in faceoffs, can power play, good penalty killing, fine. That's massive. Obviously, he's a veteran. He's 29 years old. So there's all these. Yeah, and maybe I'm falling into justifying the trade. I don't even have to justify it for myself. I love the way you put it about Calgary and relevancy to those assets for us right now. So this could be one of those rare. Yeah, because we're never going to see. We haven't seen. Thank God, Patrick Allvin get fleeced on a trade yet, because he's just too smart. I think I really think that, and I think this is one where you can't simply say that we smoked Calgary on this trade. It could be one of those where both teams actually are going to make out okay, and that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean it's a rental, right? In the long term, Calgary is going to get more value out of it. In the short term, Vancouver is going to get more value out of it, right? It's a hard thing to quantify. I do think the price was higher than I expected it to be, and again, if you had to give letter grades to the trade, I would say Calgary probably gets an A and Vancouver maybe gets a B+, which is fine. I'm fine with a B+ trade. And sure, maybe it helps, a divisional rival into the future, but not a significant amount that I'm going to be losing sleep over.
Yep. Well said. Well said. Okay. So now these Calgary, Vancouver games, which there are going to be a few more of, are going to be even more interesting.
Not just because more. This year. And
both years,
Calgary probably won't make the playoffs.
Yes.
So let's go into a couple things that we need to talk about then. One is going to be obviously each piece given up, right? That's something we should talk a little bit more in depth about. And then the actual cap implications. Because I think if you look at it strictly on paper, and again, you mentioned it might be justifying the trade, sure. However, I think I've prefaced it enough by saying I think Calgary did really well. The cap situation on this trade's really good, right? Andrei Kuzmenko is making $5.5 million this year and next. And it's pretty clear that under Rick Tocchet, he's just not going to work, right? We talked about this on Monday when we were talking about potential players for the Canucks to trade. On the forward side, Kuzmenko was the fourth highest paid forward on the Canucks behind Miller, Pettersson, and Besser. The people, that you could trade also would be like Connor Garland making $500K less, but he has such a good fit with Bluger and Joshua that you really can't mess with that right now.
Mhm.
Ilya Mikheyev making 4.75, right? It's $750,000 less than Kuzmenko, so trading him has that much less value. And I think he's been slightly better than Kuzmenko this year. He hasn't been great, but he's been fine. And then after that, it falls off a cliff. Right now, everyone makes below $2 million. So to get a player like Lindholm, you have to give up some sort of, you got to send cap back.
Yes.
Andrei Kuzmenko was not playing up to that contract. He would not play up to that contract next year in a Canucks uniform. He could go to Calgary and score 35 goals next year. He would not do that here. I promise you. But what that does is that is now $5.5 million that the Vancouver Canucks do not have to spend next year on Andrei Kuzmenko, and they don't have to spend it all. Elias Lindholm's contract ends this year. If they want to use him as a pure rental and cut bait after the fact and just put that money towards Elias Pettersson or towards Phil Hronek or towards Dakota Joshua, like whatever they need to do, they now have that extra little bit of flexibility that I think is a nice little sort of silver lining to the trade that, again, doesn't affect Calgary at all, but I think it's a nice little bit of extra good news.
I think that's an excellent point, Parker, because everyone, saw 5.5 versus 4.85, and they said, there's 650 grand in savings this year, which is all true. But you make a really, really good point about that 5.5 that comes off the Canucks books. Now, whether that helps sign Lindholm to an extension, so the cap's going to go up $4 million. Petey's going to make a lot. Hronek's going to make a lot. We're not going to sign all 7 of our UFAs. There's absolutely no way. Right. So, oh man, this is, and we know that Lindholm's not thinking extension yet. I think he was traveling today, trying to get from wherever he was vacationing to Toronto for the All-Star festivities. So, wow. I'm still, when you just look at the magnitude of the trade, it's still quite big. It's reverberating inside me, unless that's my dinner that I wolfed down before we went live. But one of the two things is reverberating inside me.
So for the assets given up, I mean the big one, is Andrei Kuzmenko, and we've sort of talked about him, right? He wasn't going to work here anymore, and man, it sucks because I love Andrei Kuzmenko. Like the pictures of him just having the biggest smile and the interviews of his broken English, like that's a tough piece to lose, but it's a casualty of Rick Tocchet's system. Right.
Can I ask you one quick question about Kuzmenko? Sorry, Parker. Just before I forget, sorry to interrupt. I hate doing that, but I do it all the time. So at my parent meeting that I was running today, there's two like Canucks fans that instead of talking more about church, we're talking about the Canucks. And we were talking about how much Kuzmenko loves the city, how he, as you mentioned right at the top, he had to waive his no trade clause because Calgary is one of 12 teams that he initially said no to. Do you think there's any part of Kuzmenko that waived it because he wants, this is so weird for me to say, but he wants Vancouver to succeed. He actually liked his time here. He wants to do good by the organization. Do you think that's any part of it? Like, of course, it's role, opportunity, everything that he's going to get in Calgary. But do you think there's a small piece that he wanted to do, for lack of a better term, the Canucks are solid?
I think for him, and I imagine it's what he talked about with his agent, I think he probably realized that he could stick around this year, have a interesting cup run that maybe he plays, 12 minutes a night, and maybe win a Stanley Cup, right? Potential. But I imagine it then went, okay, well then what happens after next year, right? What happens if you put up, 30 points next year under a Rick Tocchet team and your $5.5 million contract ends, right? And you're 29, 30 years old. I think from his career perspective, if his priority isn't a 5 to 8% chance of winning a Stanley Cup and on, financial opportunity and, just individual success, I think it's the right move. And I think that's probably where the focus was.
Right.
I don't know if I would have done the same in his situation. Maybe I would have tried to get moved to the off season to somewhere a little bit warmer. Because, I know he went to Edmonton and got wine and dine there and left, and it may be the same in Calgary. But, that's sort of my thought. I don't think he's thinking, I'm going to do the Canucks organization a solid. I'm sure. Okay. Dan Milstein said they had been talking about it with Rick Tocchet and Patrick Allvin since Sunday. So that's interesting, right? And I think that probably reflects really well on the Canucks, like going to him days ahead of time before this thing came out. Because my impression was like, hey, the trade's in progress, and now we have to call Andrei Kuzmenko. And he's probably like, sort of, you're sort of stuck there, right? Like, man, if I say no, like, do the Canucks fans start to hate me? Yada, yada, yada.
Right.
For nixing this trade.
Yeah.
So I think they probably communicated it well, and it probably was, fairly mutual. And it probably is, for him, probably the best move in the long term.
Yeah. And as John said, now he can play 18 minutes a night in Calgary and get flipped at next year's trade deadline, which is likely the case. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, I mentioned that 5 to 8% chance of winning a cup this year. But yeah, what if he's producing really well in Calgary and he's got, 20 goals when they get to the deadline next year? There's going to be teams calling and saying, hey, we would love to add a second line winger to our playoff push. And he'd be a pretty good option on an expiring contract.
Yeah. Okay, so it's to wrap up this Kuzi talk too. I know you and I have both not even debated. I think we're on the same side. We weren't sure how Kuzi would do in the playoffs. Would he come up with a big goal once in a while? Maybe. Or would he be aggravating to watch, because that's when you really have to tone down the errors, turnovers, and play a bit of defense too. So I think Lindholm's probably a bit better playoff performer, I presume.
Yeah, I think so. Not that he's had a lot of experience, right?
Yeah.
He's played 27 playoff games. He's got 17 points, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
But he does strike me as more of that style of player, which I think will be useful.
Yeah.
Other assets given up. I mean, a first round pick in the 30 to 32 range, most likely. Sorry, 30 to 32. Sorry, I should say like 25 to 32 range.
Right.
Most likely. I never remember how everything breaks down when, like, at what point the standings stop mattering in the playoff, like how that sort of works in draft position, because we haven't had to worry about that very much.
Yeah, we've been on the non-playoff side. Yes.
Yeah, so I literally never think about it because I don't care about where the Tampa Bay Lightning pick. They pick 29th or 31st. Doesn't matter to me. Let's do a fun exercise that I always like to do whenever we have draft capital getting thrown around. Let's go back to the 2018 NHL entry draft, right?
All right.
Long enough ago that players that were drafted there that are going to end up in the NHL are probably in the NHL at this point. I'm just going to go through 25 to 35.
Okay.
Because it's probably where this pick's going to, it can't be 35, but guys that are available down there. You've got Dominic Bach, never played an NHL game. Jacob Bernard Docker has played 70 games for Ottawa as a D-man. Nicholas Baudin, 22 games for Chicago, and none in the last 3 years. Niels Lundqvist in New York, Rasmus Sandin in Toronto, Joe Veleno in Detroit, Alexander Alexeyev in Washington, Matthias Samuelsson in Buffalo, Jonathan Berggren in Detroit, Sarah Noel in Florida, and Jesse Alonen in Montreal, and for good measure, Jet Wu in Vancouver. A couple of those guys are on the 200 game mark. A couple of those guys are 70. Like Sandin has been good for Toronto, right? But we're talking about a bunch of guys who have played a handful of NHL games and are depth guys for the most part in the NHL. That's just sort of what late first round picks end up being. Right. Good bit of currency. Maybe guys who would have been useful for the Canucks 4 years from now, 5 years from now, in sort of that depth role, but also guys that would be quite replaceable, I would think. So I never like giving up draft capital, but when you're in this position, I really don't hate it. It's not that I didn't like pick 2018 just because I was like, oh, this was a bad year in the late first round. I just picked a random year. I'm sure it's, and I can scroll down. There's going to be some random hits down here, like Kirill Marchenko or Sean Dursey later in the second. But again, I had a comment on my video today and I was talking about Brzustewicz being like, it's sort of the peak of his eyes. I was like, well, Adam Fox was a 3rd round pick. And it's like, yeah, but how many Adam Foxes are there? it's again, there's 30 3rd round picks a year, 32 now, and one hits every 2 or 3 years, right? We're talking a 1% conversion rate on being an actual star. So I'm really not going to get too worked up about a first round pick, a late first round pick, when we're talking about the chance at winning a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, Brzustewicz could be Adam Fox or he could be Joni Jurmo.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Like, let's look at 3rd round picks from 2018, right? To sort of follow that same reference, right? This is 5-6 years ago now. There's 2 of them that have played significant time. Jack McBain and Connor DeWar. Right? Like, sure. Let's pick 2008 was a really good draft, right? What happened in round 3? Michael Stone in Phoenix had 150 career points. Zach Smith in Ottawa had 200 points. Adam Henrique was really good. Okay, there's 3 guys who were really relevant in that whole set, right? So, again, it's lottery tickets for Calgary, and it's exactly what you want to get rid of for a rental. But for the Canucks, like, the odds of those hitting again are pretty low, even with how good Brzustewicz has looked. This might be the best that his value will ever be. Sure. And if you're a team gearing up for a push, Hunter Brzustewicz in 3 years isn't that useful to you.
Yep. By the way, last resort came through. The final 4 teams get the final 4 picks, and picks 27 and higher are determined by standings. So only the conference winners, the conference finalists.
Gotcha.
Okay, that's good to know. But we weren't even close to that. Okay, so before we get to Hunter, before we get to Joni Jurmo, so we talked about the first of the draft picks. The second one is a conditional draft pick, 4th round, but goes to a 3rd rounder if we make the Western Conference final. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Yep.
Cool. I hope it's a 3rd.
And actually, before and Park and I had the advantage, and like many of you of reading this. So just for those of you that didn't hear it or didn't know and think this through, and this isn't to insult anyone's intelligence, but really a conditional pick means exactly what it sounds like. There's conditions, and if certain conditions are met, the pick changes. So right now it's a 2024 4th round pick, but if the Canucks win 2 rounds and are in the final, then that jumps up to a 3rd rounder. So maybe we're splitting hairs here or whatever. And we're not going to be too worried that jumps up around if we're now 1 round closer to making the Stanley Cup
final. We will be celebrating like, oh man, our pick got, went down 30 spots.
Yeah.
Darn, that's going to really suck for the 2030 Vancouver Canucks. Maybe.
I want to acknowledge Lucas's donation before we get too far. Thank you, Lucas. We appreciate you. It's a deal that works for both parties. Agreed. Flames heading for the rocks and into a hard rebuild, and Canucks are heading for contention. Got to trade high for this deal, especially for contention. Well said. We agree. Thank you.
Yeah. Lucas. And it's very clear that they had a guy in mind, right? And that guy was Elias Lindholm, right? They didn't, they weren't going to go the Giroux route, as much as to my dismay. They're not going the Sidney Crosby route, which probably was never feasible. But they said, hey, there's one guy that we really like, and the price probably isn't going to change much. And the only risk that we run is, if we're going to go for him anyways, the risk is someone else gets there first. And
good question.
Have
we ever hit 300 subscribers? We just did. 300 viewers.
I think maybe once.
Okay.
So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining.
And
by the way, hit the like button and subscribe buttons while you're here.
Yeah.
We do appreciate it.
And I was listening to you as I was watching our little tracker go up. It was exciting.
Yeah. But it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about the 2 draft pick. Obviously, we talked about Kuzi. We've talked about the 2 draft picks, the 1st and the 4th, could be a 3rd. You want to talk about Hunter or Joni first?
Yeah, I mean, Hunter Brzustewicz is the more notable one, right?
Yep.
I don't think Joni is. I don't think he's ever going to step foot on North American ice, to be completely frank with you. So that's he didn't have a contract. I'm sure his rights were expiring in a year or 2. Not that I know the actual number, but no concern there, right? That's an extra body for Calgary to maybe try to do something with. Hunter Brzustewicz, 75th overall pick in this most recent draft. So some Canucks fans will try to justify and be like, oh, yeah, it's 75th overall last year. What does that matter, right? But the Canucks made seemingly a very good pick with that 75th overall. And got a player who, like I mentioned, 69 points in 47 games as a defenseman on that Kitchener team. 3rd in OHL scoring, right? He leads his team in points as a defenseman. That's very impressive. However, like I mentioned, this is likely the highest his value will ever be. Nothing against him. Like there's a real chance that he pans out. Like he projects. I saw a few things like, he projects as a 3rd line NHL player one day, right? And that's because as a 75th overall pick, you can go and be fantastic for a year, and maybe that bumps your stock up to the equivalent of like a mid to high 2nd. Maybe that's where his value sort of sits right now.
Yeah.
But for the Canucks, they turned last year's third round pick into something with slightly more value, and then traded that for Elias Lindholm. Which I've loved following Brzustewicz's game. Like
Hmm.
he was a very intriguing prospect. But again, we're talking about a player who's a 19-year-old defenseman, right? Defensemen don't usually make it till they're 22, 23, especially third rounders. They pretty rarely hit, right? So maybe if we're optimistic, maybe there's a 30 to 40% chance that Hunter Brzustewicz would have played in the NHL. Maybe there was a 10% chance he plays 100 games. And I feel like I'm being generous.
Right.
Um, and maybe my numbers would have been higher while he was still in the Canucks organization. I don't know because I didn't think about it too much. Um, but again, for Calgary, a rebuilding team, that's exactly what you want, right? You want lottery
Mhm.
tickets. That's exactly what the Canucks were doing, right? But you get the Adam Gaudetts of the world, right? Guys who look great in college, or Jack Rathbone might be a more apt example when we're talking about
Yes.
defensive prospects, or Jet Wu. Remember how good Jet Wu looked the year after we drafted him? So guys don't pan out sometimes, and
No.
maybe this one will. It's a lottery ticket for Calgary, but the value is probably the highest it will ever been, just from a historical standpoint.
Agree with everything you said, and I like the Jack Rathbone comparison. Brucevich's numbers are better than Rathbone, but when
Mhm.
Rathbone had that short stint with the Canucks at the end of one of the seasons, it was like, oh, this guy's gonna be good. He could be the next coming of Quinn Hughes. Da da da. And I think when you look and when you project the Canucks lineup 3 or 4 years down the road on the blue line, on the right side, which is what Brzustewicz was, a right shot defenseman, that's Tom Verlander's spot that we're looking at, right? That top four. Let's presume
Yeah,
Hronik's here. So you
right
go
D number
Hronik.
two.
Yeah, exactly. You go Hronik, Verlander, and then someone cheap, honestly, because we're going to be spending all this money. So is it a guy that profiles like a Juleson, who's been kind of a revelation, or maybe a bit better than that? But I don't know if Brucevich's game, if you already have a Quinn Hughes kind of doing what Brzustewicz is kind of good at, which is great for him, not a knock on him. I know I've read, a lot of my friends have been saying it's kind of I don't know if redundant's the right word, Parker, but at least you already have a guy who can do what Brzustewicz is good at. But
Yeah, it wasn't a spot of need for the Canucks going into the
yeah,
future, right? There's very real chance that even if he made the NHL, he would end up being an asset to be moved.
yeah,
Um, yeah, if you have your top four guys, right? Your top four guys are ideally guys you draft and develop and have cost controlled, right? That's
mm-hmm.
the important part. Your 5-6 D pair, the Canucks showed, hey, worst case scenario, you can go get Ian Cole for $3 million. You can pull in a Mark Friedman for 775, or a Noah Juleson for 775, or fill in those spots with an Akito Hirose or a Cole McWard at worst, right? Or you can go get a Matt Irwin for cheap, right? Depth defensemen aren't that expensive if
Yes,
you have a competent management group, which this one has shown that it has been. So yeah, if we're talking about a guy who projected to be a number 3 right D, those guys there's 24 of those in free agency every year for $1.5 million, right?
yep, yeah,
So maybe you lose a little bit of cost certainty. Maybe you're paying someone 1.5 instead of 900K 3-4 years from now. That's not something you really need to worry about right now.
right. Yeah, okay, that's fair. So, and I kind of what you said. I know a lot of people said we sold high from a standpoint of he hasn't done anything at the NHL level, but because he is having a really good season right now, there's been some eyes on him, and that's a good thing as opposed to the next guy that we're going to be talking about, who probably is at a low right now in his. I actually forgot we had him, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So, I mean, if we think Brzustewicz is maybe like fourth in the Canucks prospect pipeline,
Yep. Yep.
Jurmo's probably not making the article.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's a 21-year-old defenseman. He'll be 22 by the end of the year, from Finland. He does look like Finnish Brock Besser, so he's got that going for him. But he's playing in the top Finnish league. He's not like a point producer, right? He has 3 points this year in 34 games. He had 13 last year in 52. So,
Mm.
trending the wrong way. Again, I don't know much about Finnish hockey, but I imagine that probably isn't looked on fantastically. What was he? Where was he picked? Was he like a sixth? No, he's a third.
Third.
Third in
Yeah.
2020.
Yep. Third rounder.
And again, lots of guys in the third round don't pan out. And I think that's probably going to be the case here. Yeah, I don't see him. Like, what is he going to leave Finland for the AHL one day? Like, I don't see him ever making an NHL roster. Like, that's just not the player he profiles to be. But he's under contract. He's a free, essentially asset for Calgary. That, maybe there's a 1% chance he turns into something, years down the line, they have his rights, but nothing to get worked up about here.
Yeah. He was our highest pick in that draft year because we didn't have any first round picks anymore.
Yeah. Well, we were notoriously a contender that year, right?
Exactly. That's why we gave up all those picks. Different than this year.
Way different.
Wow.
So much different.
Wow. So what's next?
I guess that was we didn't the first because we traded. That was the Miller trade, right? That worked out.
Yes,
because that was Shakir Mohammedoul, and
that's right.
That one worked out fine, but still,
yes, yeah.
So that's everything the Canucks gave up. It's a lot on paper, and like I said, for Calgary, it's a lot of good lottery tickets, and for the Canucks, it's a lot of guys who probably were never going to play on your roster. Kuzmenko, or two guys who are probably never going to play on your roster. First round pick who maybe has a 30% chance of panning out. And under Kuzmenko, who clearly is not going to work under Rick Tocchet. And again, nothing against Rick Tocchet. He's going to win the Jack Adams this year. He's an all-star coach, yada, yada, yada. Just didn't work for Kuzmenko, which sucks because I loved Kuzmenko. It was fun to watch here. But the Canucks now are it doesn't hurt their cup odds this year.
Yeah. What happens if Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson choose ELIAS Lindholm ahead of like JT Miller tomorrow?
That'd be cool. I don't think they will. I think the thing is, I bet they could pick Miller and then pick Lindholm in the next round.
Yeah,
because he hasn't been phenomenal this year. So maybe they just get the whole band together. They could just field a team.
Yeah. They could have 6 players. They're 5 and Lindholm now 6 players. They could be more than half of one of the 11 spot player teams. That'd be crazy. That'd be
very cool. Very cool.
Kind of want to see them play against each other though too.
But. Yeah, of course.
Wow.
So there's 366 people in here, which I think is our record. Record. So make sure you hit subscribe while you are here. We do, for those of you who are new, we do this show every Monday night, 10 p.m. same time. So make sure you subscribe. Come stick around. Usually we don't have things this exciting to talk about, but we have had a lot of Canucks wins to talk about, which is also pretty exciting. And of course we'll gear up as we get into the postseason. Lucas with another $10. Thank you very much, Lucas. Saying, I wonder if the Flames will welcome Kuzmenko with a bundle of Pepsi cans and bananas. He does love those.
Yes.
Thank you, Lucas, for the donation. We really do appreciate that.
366 people in here and 365 of them are happy. Messier, I see your comments. No problem. The chat is there for you guys to chat with each other too. We appreciate you being here, but people here know that usually Parker and I will get to the chat at the very end, but we don't always do, admittedly. But we're happy you're here.
So where does that take us? It's 10:43. Normally we do an hour. And I came into this being like, this will be like a 25, 30 minute. We'll get through it. But there were so many moving pieces involved. My question is sort of like, you think they're done?
Nope.
No, right? They got what, 40 days or something along those lines, like 38 days. When's the trade deadline? Is it the 10th?
Yeah, I know it's a single digit, but it's around there, March 6 or 8 or something like that. Yeah.
Either way, they got like 5 weeks.
Yep.
5 weeks to figure more out, right?
March 8th.
You get this the 8th?
Yeah, it is the 8th.
Okay. The Canucks play 20 games before then. Almost. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 16 games before the trade deadline. The Canucks play.
Okay.
Right. So they've played 49. So they'll played 65 games by then, and we'll have an even better picture of where they fall. It's a lot of time to make some more moves. From a cap perspective, where they currently have everything sitting, they have about $2 million in cap space at the deadline. However, they still haven't put Susie on LTIR. I don't know exactly how much that plays in, but I wonder if that would free up more if they think. I guess they would have to think Susie would be out till the playoffs so they could reactivate him then.
Right.
Because I'm sure they're pretty sure that, Tucker Poolman's going to be not playing this year.
And you can go retroactive, so you accrue some of that. So it's not like, I don't know what the final number is going to be, but they might have even a little bit more.
Right. So some routes they could go, right? They could try to pick up like a cheap forward, potentially, right? I mean, Phil Kessel, for example. Do you think, but it does sound like the Canucks are kind of interested in Chris Tanev.
Yeah.
Do you think they just continue this Craig Conroy, Patrick Allvin trade tree?
Well, that's what I was going to bring up. We have Rick Dollywall tweeting, working on to see if Chris Tanev is in this deal as well. And then I think it was
crazy.
Yeah. And then Drager, I think, or someone said, I heard that as well, but it's going to, if it happens, it will be a separate transaction. Wow.
Yeah. And then so Dollywall did a little selfie video a la Kevin Weeks at about 7:00 tonight. And he said, quote, Chris Tanev was a part of these trade talks. The belief is that the Flames were asking for another first-round pick just for Tanev. So that would be the 2025 first. Yeah. That gets a little scary to me, trading 2 years out, because in theory you want to, you don't want to go all in on 1 year, because even the best team ever has like a 20% chance of winning the Stanley Cup, it feels like. Just because it's such a gauntlet and there's 16 teams, right? You just have to lose 4 out of 7 and you're done. So that first round pick, I imagine if the Canucks are in a similar position next year, is going to be a nice little, thing to try to add another, cheap rental at the deadline.
Yep.
And then my fear, of course, is that what if all of this is just a hoax and a one-off and the Canucks are actually not good and they've somehow won all these games and they're going to, do well in the playoffs this year, then next year they're going to be in the lottery again. And now this 2025 first round pick is gone, yada, yada, yada. It's a little bit irrational, but we've seen how quickly this team has turned one way. And we've had so much pain in the past that I just have this fear that they'll just turn back and I'll just be sad again.
So, and Tanev, I believe he makes $5 million, right? Yeah. $5 million. So
right. On an expiring deal. I mean, theoretically, if they want Chris Tanev, they could sign Chris Tanev in 6 months.
Right.
5 months even.
Right. That defeats the purpose, though, if you want him for your playoff run.
Right. It would be for a next year, sort of addition. And I imagine he'd be fairly cheap being, turning 35 next year.
So I think people are saying in the chat that, they expect some other moves, but maybe not as big. Well, this one's massive, but maybe Tanev also counts as a big one, and maybe it's not going to happen. Man, I was getting pretty excited though. I don't know what the return would have been when there was thoughts that he might be included or that another deal. Regardless, I don't know if they're still going to talk about him. But you're right; they have 6 weeks still, 5 weeks.
Yeah, I feel like the route that they will go. Right.
Yeah.
Like, here's what for this year they have a third. They have New Jersey's 4th. They have 2 6ths and a 7th, right? Yep. Asset wise, they're pretty low. And then next year they have everything except their 3rd. Same in 2026. They already don't have their 3rd and their 7th. Not that I care about a 7th. So I wonder, based on the limited cap space, right? About $2 million at the deadline.
Yep.
I wonder if it's sort of the perfect, just add some depth at the deadline, right? Remember think of the Tyler Mott trade or the Luke Shen trade, right? Guys who you can pick up for a 4th, that New Jersey 4th round pick. Maybe the Canucks draft nobody this year. You ship out a 4th or you ship out, sort of a low level prospect like, I don't know, Nick Chichek, the guy they got from San Jose. Maybe you trade him for that sort of caliber of player, right? Like a depth D-man or they don't need a depth D-man. They got Matter when they got, but like a depth winger potentially, right? To sort of bump maybe like a, whoever, a Niels Oman maybe down if need be, or if you have injuries, right? And PDG isn't healthy, right? They can fill that role. I think maybe that's the route they could go. This is their big splash. They sort of threw all their assets. they have some assets, right? They have Ratu, they have Villander and Lekaramaki.
Yeah.
I don't think they're trading those guys.
No, definitely
Um,
not. DPD. Yeah.
especially because they don't have the cap space to acquire anybody with those guys.
Yeah.
But I could definitely see them just going that route, right? Some
Mhm.
nice depth, a sort of a fourth line player, for like a third round pick.
I agree with you, Parker. And especially if we stick to what we said just 48 hours ago on Monday night when we were talking about Juleson, Friedman, and McWard, Hirose, Wolanin, Irwin, all being fine guys like, well, Juleson and Friedman 7 and 8, and then the rest of the guys 9 through 12, 9 through 13. Not amazing, but good enough for like a playoff run. As long as your main guys stay healthy, then I would agree with you. I think we should look for a bottom six depth because I think those guys are better than what we have in the fringes of our forwards. You're right. The Carlsons, the DiGiuseppe's when he gets healthy, and then this whole swath of guys in Abbotsford. But I wouldn't say any of them are ready for playoffs. That's something for next year that we can get excited about when we have to save some money so we can sign some big RFAs. So I agree with you. All to say, I would love some more depth in the forward ranks now, especially because remember when we got Lindholm, it's not like we got another forward. We had to ship out Kuzmenko, so we're still the net number is still the same when it comes to active roster players.
Right. If anyone goes down right now,
yep,
Linus Karlsson's getting called up and getting in the lineup, right?
Yeah.
That's I don't think a place that they want to be in a playoff matchup, right?
I agree.
I'm sure they would much rather, bump a Neil Zoman out of the lineup and have him as your 13th forward, for example, right? If you can go and, add a third line player, add a, wishful thing would be like adding a Jordan Greenway. I saw that mentioned in the chat. Something along those lines. Because on defense, right? You add a depth defenseman. It's like, oh wow, you're now playing a depth defenseman instead of Noah Juleson if someone gets hurt, or Mark Friedman. Pretty marginal probably. But over Linus Karlsson, if you have like a 32-year-old bona fide depth forward, maybe that's someone you'd rather have in a playoff matchup.
Yep. Well, the beautiful thing is, Parker, yes, 5 weeks away. We can have 5 more weeks of talk like this. And pretty crazy that on January 31st, a day that starts with our GM getting extended for 3 years. It's funny. We didn't even think, well, we wouldn't have an emergency podcast for that. We would just talk about it on Monday. But on that day, just whatever, 6 hours later or 8 hours later, he's making a massive trade.
Yeah.
What a time to be alive.
I mean, good on him. I mean, most GMs either get fired or like not many GMs just have their contract run out and sort of fade off into the sunset, right? He would have got extended at some point anyways, or he would have got fired at some point anyways. Not surprising he got extended because they've been doing some really good work.
Yep. More to come, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, perfect day for me. I tweeted about this about 2 hours ago now. I basically said to my two favorite teams, right, the Canucks and the Seahawks, both made moves today that in a perfect world, right? Let's either the Canucks win the Stanley Cup this year, right? Wishful thinking, but they are now a bona fide contender, right? We can look back at January 31st, 2024 as like the day that got set into motion, right? And then for the Seahawks, they go out and they hire, the most sought after coach out there in Mike McDonald. And again, if the Seahawks win a championship in the next 5-7 years with him at the helm, I can look back on January 31st, 2024 as maybe what spurred that. So hopefully both happen. And then this can be a precursor to, this could be a perfect day. Or the Canucks can lose in the first round and Lindholm walks. And Mike McDonald is the next Brandon Staley, and then I'm sad.
No matter what, you'll remember this day forever.
It's the magic of sports.
Yeah.
It's what we sign up for.
Yeah. Spartan, just want to remind everyone that the Canucks are better than the Oilers. By the way, speaking of Oilers, the Oilers fans are funny, man, because they are the ones that are saying, oh, both teams got hooped on the trade, or no one won this trade, or both teams suck, or whatever. It's fine. Edmonton's a good team.
Yeah, one of my friends is a Flames fan. He texted me like as things were happening. He's like, "Can you guys stop stealing our players? Like, what's going on here?" I'm like, "Hey, we'll take Tanev next week. Don't worry." And then his sort of final words were, "Hey, as if it helps you beat Edmonton, I'm happy to cheer for you.
Wow.
All right, perfect.
Yeah. If the Calgary Flames
we,
don't make the playoffs, which doesn't look like it's gonna happen, yeah, you can cheer for us. We'll
we
be
have a
happy.
common
Spartan,
enemy.
there you go.
I think I dislike the Oilers more than the Flames. So
Yeah, I'm opposite, but oh well, whatever. Thank you, Spartan, for the donation. Appreciate it.
not that I like the Flames. I'm not just saying. I'd be happy to win with Lindholm on the team.
They've been giving us some good content the past 2 months. The Flames, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy day.
Yeah.
400 people in here. Thank you all for joining. Definitely, I think we definitely hit our peak. Only 85 likes though. Get those numbers up. Do you want to take a couple questions before we wrap up here? What do you want to do?
Sure. Yeah, let's do that. Let's hit our hour mark by doing 3 to 5 minutes of questions, and I think we're good.
Sure. I'll let you hold the fort down. I'm going to throw a poll in the chat.
Okay.
Just asking for a letter grade on the Lindholm trade.
Sounds good. While you do that, and while everyone, we ask you to be respectful of one another. I guess we have 400 people. That's 4 times as many people we usually get. There's going to be 4 times as much craziness in the chat. But now we have a few. Okay, good. Edmund says, "What line? Who does Lindholm play with?" Well, I think if you put the Lotto line bet together, then Mikheyev is one line mate for Lindholm, and then you don't have to play Suter in the middle. If you don't, you could actually play Suter on the other winger right now, and that's what I would do. I would go Hoglander and Mikheyev with Lindholm.
Yeah, I realized just now that's a great question, Edmund, because that's what I literally thought that I was like, that was going to be one of the things that we talked about during this. And one thing we should talk about is, what does this actually do to the lines? Because we've seen a bit of the Lotto line. We've seen, they've been big on the pairs, right? And last year, Pettersson Kuzmenko was a pair. JT Miller-Besser was a pair. This year, Kuzmenko's fallen off a bit. So Pettersson Mikheyev have been a little bit of a pair. And then they ended up with Miller and Besser, and things have been changing around. So the Canucks have 3 top 6 forwards, a situation that they were in last year, if you remember. So yeah, a couple of routes, right? Do you stack it all up on the Lotto line and then put Lindholm between Mikheyev, and you could pull Hoglander up, you could leave Suter up there. How do you sort of picture everything working out here?
I either go Lotto with Lindholm, Mikheyev, Suter, or I load up the Swedes on one line. I put Lindholm and Petey together. I just think that, so you keep Lindholm and Petey together, you keep Besser and Miller together, and then whatever, put Suter there and Mikheyev here. I don't know. But yeah, I like what you're saying about the pairs, and I think it's going to be obvious that Brock and JT are a pair. And when now with Kuzmenko gone, Petey's running mate, even though he wasn't playing 6 healthy scratches. Maybe Lindholm becomes Petey's guy if they keep the 2 lines split up.
Yeah. Based on what we've seen with Lindholm in the past, and again, I haven't watched a ton of Flames hockey, but from everything I've read, he needs good line mates, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
The anecdotal evidence adds up, right? Hey, he plays with Gaudreau and Kachuk, and he's a point a game player, right? For a whole 82 games. Put him with Toffoli, really pretty good player, 62 points. Put him with nobody, he falls off. So yeah, who would he fit really well with? An Elias Pettersson sounds great, right? If you can keep Miller and Besser together, maybe throw him with Suter, and then you can put Pettersson and Lindholm together, and you can sort of take your pick, right? You can put Mikheyev up there. Part of me would love to see Hoglander get a spin up there too. Yeah. But we've seen so much good stuff from Niels Hoglander in the bottom 6 that like he is a perfect bottom 6 guy. Like at least he has been this year.
Yes.
And for some reason when he gets those top 6 minutes, he just hasn't had it. But I think that would be a very fun line if you could put Pettersson, Lindholm, and Hoglander together.
There you go. Japan for Pettersson, Lindholm, and Hoglander. Very good. Adam, thank you for the gift of 5 memberships. That is very kind of you. There's so much going on in the chat. I can't even see who got them, but we appreciate you, Adam. Oh, here, Taylor, Curtis, Jay, Spartan, and Hope Rains. That's awesome. I have one more question. Thank you, Adam, for your generosity support. One more question for you, Parker, and then we'll call it a night because 2 people asked it right away together. What are you willing to give up for Tanev, and what is the most you would give up for Tanev? So we agree, not a first rounder, we said.
No, and it's just because I think, again, trading for rentals is a reason every team does it, right? It allows you to essentially go over the cap. If you save up money during the season, you can sort of accrue some cap space. Not that this team has ever done it. and pick up a guy at the end of the year as a rental.
Yeah.
I think they're going to want their 2025 first to be used next year. Because I think if you push too many chips in now, then you're really tightening this window to be like, all right, well, we better do something this year. Yeah. And again, most teams don't on their first push into the postseason.
There's got to be money going back, right? There's no way we can just take $5 million on.
Right. That's a tough thing too, right? Like, okay, are you having to throw in Ilya Mikheyev to make that happen? Right. I feel like would have to be involved. How many years does Mikheyev have left?
3, 2 or 3
this year and 2 more, right? That might be a tough sell for Calgary, right? And then you have to add in more assets, right? Are they going to want, they said they wanted a first, right? Does Mikheyev and a third get it there? I highly doubt it. Yeah. Do you have to start going down the Vasily Podkolzin route to get a trade like that done? Mm-hmm. That's maybe Atu Ratu and Mikheyev and a third or something. Like, yeah, it's tough. It really, the farm starts to get pretty thin when you start dipping into those waters. But that's the thing. It's like, how much of a percentage increase are we talking cup odds wise, right? Right. It's a tough balancing act. Now, if they go and do it, I will say, all right, sick, let's ride. Kind of like I did today. But it might not be the best idea.
So here's one thing to leave you with, Parker. You gave Calgary an A, which is I don't disagree with. You gave the Canucks a B+, which is fine. So I looked at the Athletic right after you said that, and they had 3 of their writers do immediate trade grades. Calgary got 1 B and 2 B minuses, and Vancouver got 1 B from the same person and 2 B pluses. So interesting. Yep. I didn't read because I can't do.
That's a lot of B's. That sounds like a pretty good trade.
Yep. Both ways. Around. Both ways. B's. Yep.
And poll wise here, B was the favorite. 54%. We had 148 votes come in. 54% said B. Probably our most voted on poll ever. 54% said B. 33% said A. And then 8 said C. 4 said D. So outliers.
And B's a safe bet too.
So A's and B's is 87% of the vote.
Love it.
Which pretty good.
So if Canucks do something crazy tomorrow, are we meeting here again at 10?
I guess so. I doubt it. I doubt that will happen.
Yeah. They all got a hobnob in Toronto tomorrow.
Folks, this is my cue to tell you, hit that notification bell after you hit the subscribe button, because who knows when we're going to show up, especially as we get into the playoffs. You might see more of us if the team's doing really well. You might see less of us if the team's doing really well. I haven't figured it out yet, because I'm going to try to be at as many games as possible if my bank account's dismay, but we will we'll see.
I know a guy.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. I will try to take you up on that. Folks, again, to the 400 of you here, thank you all for joining. For all of you that are new, you can find me on Twitter at ParkersPucks, Clay on Twitter at ParkersPucks. We also have our own YouTube channels. I have a video that's up right now that is sort of my thoughts specifically on the trade. So you're welcome to go watch that. You can ParkersPucks on YouTube, Canuck Clay on YouTube. We keep the branding pretty simple. Clay, Wednesday night, February begins in 1 hour. Any parting words?
Well, maybe we should move our shows to Wednesday. No, I think we just got to keep ensuring that Patrick Allvin makes massive moves. No, this is if there was ever any doubt what the Canucks MO was for this season, taking it slow, making sure this isn't a mirage, blah blah blah. Throw them out the window. These as I said on Twitter tonight, you cannot spell Allvin without having all in, and it's so true. And I think we're going to see a couple more minor to major moves, but this is just the start. And I love how we're the trendsetters, and we're not afraid to be bold. So I'm talking about the team, not us, but us too. But I'm excited. It's a good time. This is fun. This is what we've been waiting for the past 3 years.
Yeah, it's just exciting. I mean, 3 months from now, we're going to be, in a playoff series, most likely. And that's very cool. It'll be stressful, and I'll love and hate every second of it. So folks, thank you all very much for joining. Like I said, make sure you subscribe on the way out. If you missed any part of this, and again, we see that graph goes up over time, right? At 10:30, there was like 300 of you, and we're like, wow, that's crazy. So for all of you who've joined later, if you missed any part, you can rewind back to the beginning here on YouTube if you'd like to catch up. We've been talking about this trade for over an hour. So a lot for us to break down. I'll also have it uploaded on your favorite podcast platform in a matter of 10 to 15 minutes.
Awesome.
So make sure you can, if you want to subscribe over there, if you're more of an audio person, you want to listen on your way to work, that's great. Otherwise, I think that's all I have to say. Thank you all for joining us. Have a good night. And hopefully this is a good move for the Canucks. See you later.